So, if you have received a little slip of paper, it has 3 parts on it. The part on the left, as you hold it the right way up, and the part in the middle are basically just to do with what the psychological type that sort of was calculated from your preferences would look like. And that's not really anything to do with this meditation retreat, but it's useful self-knowledge. You may or may not agree with what has come out, but hopefully you recognize something of yourself in that. And if that's the case, then it probably means that the advice for meditation will be also accurate for you. I should say that for psychological type, even if it's slightly wrong, generally the meditation advice still works out good. So what we'll do is look at psychological type and the preferences that go with them. And if you're not familiar with Myers-Briggs, then you'll probably realize, you may not realize that there's no right or wrong. There's no sort of failures on this test. But what it does is it separates up everyone into society into 16 different psychological types. Yeah? But the number of types is not equal. And if we look at each of those types, then each of the types seem to have a route or route through meditation progress which seems to suit them the best. So we'll look at these in order of starting with the most common routes and moving towards the more esoteric ones. So what you see is 2 columns. On the left is what we start with when we are very new to the meditation. So what we did last night was a version of 7 bases, and that's where I would recommend anyone who is doing meditation for the first time to start their practice. Once they have become familiar with the center of the body, then they can move to the right-hand column where there are 4 choices. Okay? So the way you start out with meditation can be with either with a mantra to help you. Let me see if I can get it to be a mantra. Okay. So if we're looking at the top one, then it's using the mantra Samarahang. If it's the bottom one, then it's doing the same thing but without the need for the mantra. Okay? As for the choices in the right-hand column, there are basically 4 choices. Once your mind becomes established at the center, then you can work with the mantra alone. So in that case, you just be hearing the mantra. You don't need to think of anything. You don't need to visualize anything. Just the sound of the mantra and the location of that should manage to keep your mind in place. Second alternative is working with the inner feeling, which means not using a picture, but feeling that you have an object there, like the invisible fruit I was talking about last night. In fact, this is the most common way forward for most people. Observation means not putting anything into the mind, but just seeing what is already there and working with that. So whatever arises in the mind, that becomes your object of meditation. Even if it's darkness, then you observe the darkness. So darkness you treat not like the lack of something, but as an object in itself to be observed further, if you get my meaning. Visualization is a classic Dhammakaya way of meditating, where you think of a picture in the mind, and that is the object of your meditation. So we'll go through in terms of the type groupings. ENFJ, ESFJ, ISFJ, ESFPs. This is 40% of the meditators generally. Okay. Start on 7 bases without the mantra, and once they've got settled at the center of the body, moving forward with inner feeling. Yeah? Next set. ENFPs, INFJs, 13% of the folks normally, 7 bases without the mantra, and then proceeding by observation. Observation sometimes is referred to as a sort of Zen meditation, because you don't put anything in, you just sit and observe. Yeah. INTPs, ESTJs have the good luck to be able to skip the 7 bases generally and just go directly to using the mantra. So what you might consider a fast track. Yeah. So what I taught you last night, you can just forget about it. Go for the mantra at your center. This means that those two groups tend to find it easy to center their mind without any help. But this is not, generally speaking, that's not the case. ISTJs, ESTPs, starting with 7 bases with the mantra and moving on to inner feeling. So an object which you feel at your center, not a picture. It's important because otherwise people strain to see something too much, and that affects their meditation adversely. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. You have to pretend that you're a beginner, in which case it would be an object you felt. But I gather that you're not so much of a beginner anymore, so you've been meditating for some time. You already have a feeling which arises by itself. You continue to observe that feeling, and that feeling will be what keeps your mind on track. Even if there are pictures that come up by themselves, then it's still the feeling that guides you most accurately. Yeah. Next group, ISFPs, INFPs. Starting with the 7 bases without the mantra, and then moving on to the classic Dhammakaya thing, visualizing that inner picture. You notice it's only 2 groups out of the 16, not too many. ISTPs, ENTJs, starting the 7 bases with the mantra, and then moving on to more of just the mantra. You know why the mantra is very important for these groups? It's generally the T bit means that you're big thinkers and they never stop thinking, so you need the mantra to counteract that. INTJs, getting down to the quite specialist groups now, starting with 7 bases with the mantra and then moving on to observation. So the Zen sort of approach, just taking it as it comes and seeing where it takes you. ENTPs, only 1%. What I noticed in the States is there seem to be more with P's on the end than in England. Another fast track and straight to observation, which means they'll probably be quite at home in a Zen temple. But if they're here, then observation is the way to go, and skipping the 7 bases would also work quite well for this particular group. Yeah? Any questions at this point? Some people say, well, that's not quite right for me. But now you know what the alternatives are. So if you find that it's not working for you according to the sort of prediction on your little piece of paper, then you know the other 4 alternatives to try and see whether they work out better for you. Yeah? So you can only learn so much about yourself from ticking boxes. And I also had the difficulty that some people ticked all the boxes, not one or other of the boxes, which sort of slowed me down slightly. That may lead to some inaccuracy. Okay, so I did manage to get some sort of psychological type out for you in spite of your enthusiasm to tick all the boxes you were given. You can keep the little slip of paper, but the piece that's stapled to it, if you have the chance to just to put in the agree strongly, agree not certain, disagree strongly, one only takes about 10 seconds, and return that, it will help out the next generation of meditators who hopefully will not only have a vague guidance for their meditation type, but it will actually be statistically significant from the number of people who have combined their type and the meditation preferences. Okay? So if you have a moment to do that at some stage, that would be really helpful. Thank you. So we sit for some meditation this morning, before the heat gets up too much, and then afterwards we'll move on to some consideration of the topic of forgiveness, which came in at number 1 on the meditation topic election. Yeah. I should say, from the point of view of meditation, anyone who is new, today after relaxing our body for 5 minutes, relaxing our mind for 5 minutes, you can visualize, you can observe, you can think of a tactile object, or you can stay with the mantra. But having relaxed oneself, there's no need to go through those first 6 spaces unless you feel a particular need to do that. And you can have the mantra or not, depending on what you feel is helpful for you. But we will go straight to the center of the body this time round, to give ourselves more time and more familiarity with the center.